give it away. Flea and John Frusciante wrote this one during a jam session in early 1991, months before the band got near a studio for Blood Sugar Sex Magic. They tracked the record at the Mansion, a Laurel Canyon house with a reputation for being haunted. Flea, Frusciante, and Kiedis moved in for 2 months. Chad Smith refused to spend a night there. Now an important detail here. Live in this era, Flea was known for a music Man StingRay, but almost the entire record this track included was cut on a Wall Mach 2. A hand-built British bass with active filters on each pickup, and a pick attack, a switch for extra percussive bite. He never once toured with it. It only exists on tape. No pedals in the chain. The tone comes straight from that onboard preamp. Flea almost cut this riff, calling it just another bass line. Rick Rubin overruled him. It became the band's first #1 single. The riff slides between notes on the low strings instead of snapping them, greasing through the changes while still punching through Frusciante's guitar instead of fighting it. The guy who almost threw this one away wrote the most recognizable bass riff of the 90s, on a bass he never played live, Higher Ground. Stevie Wonder wrote and recorded the original in 1973, playing every instrument himself. When the Chili Peppers cut their cover for Mother's Milk in 1989, they didn't slow it down to sound respectful. They sped it up into something closer to a mosh pit. And for years, plenty of fans didn't even realize they were listening to a cover. Everyone assumes this is a classic Music Man StingRay Flea, the sounds he was known for live at the time. It's not. Mother's Milk was tracked on a Spectre NS2, a completely different bass with an active EMG-style pickups. That gives it a sharper, more clipped attack than a StingRay's rounder growl. The StingRay only showed up once the band hit the road. The opening line replaces Stevie Wonder's clavinet hook note for note, but Flea slaps it instead of playing it clean, digging in harder and throwing in fills Wonder never touched. A 26-year-old punk kid took a Motown legend's most recognizable groove and made it louder without making it worse, which is a much harder trick than it sounds. And it's still the song most non-bass players think of first when they hear his name. Around the World. Californication came out in 1999, the album that brought John Frusciante back from years of addiction and gave Red Hot Chili Peppers a second act nobody expected. Flea opens the record with this bass line, and it's not subtle. It's a statement. We're back and we're loud. The gear here is exact. Flea recorded Californication almost entirely on his signature Modulus Flea bass, a graphite neck instrument built for stability over speed, but that fuzzed out intro isn't the bass tone alone. It runs through a Boss ODB3 overdrive pedal, blended so you still hear the clean bass underneath the distortion instead of losing it completely. Most people assume the whole track stays drenched in fuzz. It doesn't. Flea only kicks the ODB3 on for the intro and select hits, then drops back to a clean tone for the verses, which is exactly why the opening lands so hard. It's contrast, not volume. Some fans call this record style over substance, more riff than groove. That criticism holds for parts of the album. It doesn't hold here. This is one of the tightest fuzz bass hooks of the decade, and it's the reason half the bass players who picked up the instrument that year wanted an overdrive pedal by Christmas. Suck My Kiss. Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out in 1991, recorded at a rented Laurel Canyon mansion with Rick Rubin producing. This track is one of the clearest examples on the record of Flea deliberately holding back his usual flash, because the whole band agreed going in that the bass needed to lock with the drums, like a second kick pattern instead of showing off. Gear-wise, this is another Wall Mach 2 track. The same blue boutique bass carrying most of the album. You can see him playing it in the official music video, digging into the low strings with a percussive, almost muted attack instead of his usual bright slap tone. The riff itself is built on a tight repeating low string pattern that barely moves, which is the whole point. Chad Smith's drums and this bass line are doing the same job, landing on the same hits, functioning as one instrument instead of two separate parts layered together. It's not a flashy inclusion on a legendary bassline list, and some fans would skip it for something faster. That's the wrong read. Restraint, used this precisely at this volume, is its own kind of technique, and it's part of why Blood Sugar Sex Magik still sounds massive instead of dated. Aeroplane. One Hot Minute came out in 1995, the one Chili Peppers album made with Dave Navarro instead of John Frusciante, and it's still the most argued over record in their catalog. Flea recorded almost the entire thing on an alembic epic bass. Aeroplane is the one major exception. He said in interviews that he was worried about this song specifically, convinced it might come off as forced funk that didn't fit the band. When he tracked it live in the room, the bass didn't come through cleanly, so he had to go back and overdub the part instead of keeping the original take, which almost never happened with Flea. For that overdub, he grabbed his Man StingRay instead of the alembic, which is why this track has a completely different low end from the rest of the album. The bass line itself makes hard-slapped octaves in the verse with a completely different fingerstyle feel in the chorus, sliding and gliding instead of popping, which is a harder switch to make convincingly than it sounds. Now here's the part that should surprise people. Flea has said on record he's still never fully happy with this take and wanted to redo it. Rick Rubin talked him out of it. Sometimes the part you're sure is a mistake is the one everyone else remembers. Otherside, also from Californication 1999 and the total opposite of Around the World's opening blast. Otherside is slow, moody, and built on space, which is a much harder environment for a bass player like Flea, whose whole reputation was built on filling every gap in a song. Gear-wise, this stays on the Modulus Flea bass, same as most of the album, but played completely differently. No overdrive, no fuzz, no aggressive attack, just clean fingers and a lot of room left between notes. The bass line follows the vocal melody closely instead of running against it, doubling Anthony Kiedis's phrasing at key moments rather than adding a separate rhythmic idea on top. That's a completely different skill from slap-driven funk. It requires listening to the singer as closely as the drummer. A lot of casual fans don't clock this as a great Flea bass line because it doesn't do anything flashly, and that's exactly the point being missed. Playing less and playing it with this much control on a song this emotionally heavy is arguably harder than anything fast he's ever recorded. Can't Stop, by the way, came out in 2002, and this was the song that reintroduced Red Hot Chili Peppers to an entire generation of new fans. Flea recorded most of the album on his Modulus Flea bass, including this track, but the real story here isn't the gear, it's the ghost notes. The riff itself, broken down to raw notes, is actually simple: a slapped root, a couple of popped octaves, a chord change every few bars. What makes it sound so complicated is everything happening between those notes. Muted slap and pop hits that don't ring out but still carry rhythm. The record. Tab. This is one of the most requested Flea bass lines to learn online for a reason, and also one of the most consistently botched, because everyone practices the notes and skips the silence around them. Right on Time, also from By the Way, and it's the fastest song in the entire Chili Peppers catalog, clocking in under a minute and a half. Flea plays it in a straight 16th note pattern at roughly 126 beats per minute, which on bass is a genuine stamina test, not just a speed trick. Same Modulus Flea bass as most of the album, no effects doing the heavy lifting here. This one is pure right-hand endurance. Strip the bass line down and it's built from almost nothing. Root notes and octaves jumping up and down. The simplest shape in bass playing. What makes it land is that Flea never lets the pattern go stiff or mechanical, sliding up the neck toward the end until the whole thing starts to feel like an actual solo instead of a repeated shape. This track gets skipped on a lot of best of lists because it's barely 90 seconds long and people assume short means minor. Wrong assumption. Turning the simplest possible bass idea into something that still sounds urgent and alive at the tempo is a genuinely different skill from writing a slower, more melodic line. And not many bassists can do both. Danny, California. Stadium Arcadium, 2006, a double album where the whole band leaned back into vintage gear instead of modern rigs. Flea recorded almost the entire record on old Fender Jazz Basses, and the star of the sessions was a 1961 Jazz Bass in an extremely rare shell pink finish. So rare that decades of clear coat yellowing over the pink now makes the bass look almost white. The vintage Jazz Bass tone is exactly why this riff has that rounder, warmer low end compared to the sharper Modulus tone from the Californication and, by the way, eras. Same player, completely different sonic personality, purely from the gear choice. The main riff itself is deceptively simple, a descending line most beginner bass players can pick out by ear within a few tries, which is a big part of why it became one of the most recognizable Chili Pepper riffs, even among people who don't know the band's deeper catalog. Some serious bass nerds dismiss this one as too easy to belong on a list like this. That misses the point. Not every legendary bass line has to be the hardest one to play. Some earn the title just by being instantly, permanently stuck in your head. Under the Bridge. This one starts as a poem, not a song. Anthony Kiedis wrote the lyrics alone, working through a period of loneliness and fear of relapsing. Years after the band had already lost founding guitarist Hillel Slovak to an overdose. He almost didn't show it to anyone. Rick Rubin founded and pushed the band to build music around it. The music video shows Flea playing a Man StingRay 5. But that's not what's actually on the record. Like most of Blood Sugar Sex Magik, the real take was cut on the wall Mach 2. The StingRay was there for the cameras, not the tape. The bass line itself is the biggest outlier on this entire list. No slap, no fast frills, barely any movement at all. Just a few carefully chosen notes holding space under the chords, entering late and staying almost silent through the verses. This is the one worth ending on. Every other bass line on this list proves Flea could do more than most players. This one proves he understood exactly when to do less, on the most emotionally exposed song the band has ever released. And that restraint was the real advanced technique the flashy stuff was always building toward.